So I see other people moving forward, and I'm just dropping. And I can hear Josh and James getting into it too. And I'm looking to the right, and I can see, again, silhouettes just dropping in front of their fighting position. And all of a sudden, James and Josh's position explodes. And I can still see it clear as day. I'm thinking to myself, and I'm aiming at this guy, I'm like, I just lost my 2 sons. My name is Harry Martinez, and I served initially in the Army National Guard for 5 years. That was 83 to 87. Immediately following that, I went right into the Marine Corps, 88 to 92. Got out of the Marine Corps and began a law enforcement career that went for 15 years. In 2003, I went back into the Army National Guard to support the war effort as an Army sniper. And today, I'm still in the Guard, and I hold the rank of Sergeant Major. When I came back from Ramadi, I got picked up as an infantry school instructor. And what the Army was trying to do was take the experiences of soldiers like myself and incorporate that into leadership courses and start building up better training lanes so that it would mimic the experiences for those soldiers going into area of operations. And so I did that for almost 22 months. I went in as a basic instructor, achieved the level of senior instructor, and a tour came up. And I did that small tour with 10th Group, and then I went right in. 5 months later, I came back to the schoolhouse, and the Vermont was looking for volunteers to supplement their manpower going into Afghanistan. The year is 2008, late 2008, maybe 2009. I'm with the schoolhouse, and I go to my peers. I'm like, look, some of you have never deployed before, and it's reaching a point in the war effort where we're teaching soldiers infantry, and some of you haven't deployed. This is a great opportunity for you to deploy. And so I think there was like 3 or 4 of us, and we decided to volunteer with Vermont. And I end up at Atterbury, Camp Atterbury in Indiana. Brutal winter, really tough. And I get picked up as a as a sniper section leader by the company commander. And we go through some training, and as it plays out, when you're dealing with human beings, you're dealing with personalities. And we were not getting along. I could feel the friction. And ultimately, it resulted in me being dismissed as a sniper section leader because there was another Bravo 4 who was working as a supply sergeant, overweight, probably knowledgeable, but I don't think had the physical capacity to do what he wanted to do. And I said to the captain, look, you can bring him into operations, but what are you going to do if, God forbid, he gets killed or wounded out there? Who's going to run your logistics? Better than most people know, like the real professionals of any military understand that operations runs the mission. It drives the mission. It supports the mission. And people who in logistics, it's so complex and it's so full of many nuances. It takes a while to develop that skill set to work in logistics. So you're going to take this guy out of that and then risk him in there? And his wife is probably thinking, he's in logistics. Why was he killed outside the wire running sniper operations? Anyway, long story short, captain comes to me and says, you're out as a sniper section leader, and I don't know what to do with you. In addition to that, they had written a counseling statement. It was like 2 pages long. The first sergeant got into a conversation with me. And he says, basically, yeah, we're removing you from this position. Here's the reasons why. And I'm like, well, that's great. I don't have a problem with that. I don't need to be here. Why don't you just send me back home? I don't have nothing to prove to anyone anymore. Just send me back home. You have no need for me. And I said, in that counseling statement, you obviously listen to somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. And I pointed out something specific in the counseling statement. And he actually gets on the phone. He goes, well, let me verify what you're telling me. So he calls up this guy and goes, hey, I got the soldier in front of me. He's telling me my soldier's wrong because he's teaching it this way. And apparently the soldier right there in front of me said, yeah, I'm right. He goes, okay, thanks a lot. He takes that counseling statement and he tears it up. And this is what I mean, like you just meet so many people from all different walks of life. I meet this soldier who would later work with me, and I'm not gonna lie, I was heartbroken. Like, this is what I do, and they're not even gonna let me do it. I volunteered, I put my family through the stress that I'm leaving, and now I'm already getting this kind of nonsense. I'm sitting on my bed, and the soldier walks over and he basically tells me, you're here to serve. Don't worry about what you get and you didn't get. Either you're gonna serve or you're not. And in some ways he was telling me, this isn't about you. This is about what you bring to the table. And that was what I walked away with. That evening, I had to sit down with the first sergeant, the company commander, and the sergeant major. And those words stayed with me. And I looked at the sergeant major and I said, hey, you know what? I had argued before that, you know, if you have no need for me in this capacity, just send me home. I said, now that I've had time to reflect on it, I'm here to serve. So whatever role you have for me, whatever it is, I'll roll the dice and just let me do it. I'm here to serve. And remember, he sits back and he has the bloody bucket on, the 28th IBCT patch. And that comes up in the conversation because that indicates that he probably fought in Ramadi. And he says, are you familiar with the bloody bucket? Because I pointed it out. And he said, I said, yes. I was with the 28th IBCT in Ramadi, Camp Corregidor. And right then and there, he goes, oh, okay. And you could see his demeanor changed. And long story short, he goes, you're a strong-willed fuck. He goes, okay. He looks at the company commander, what do you want to do with him? Because he wants to serve. I can deal with that. Company commander looks at me and goes, fine. We're standing up a new team, and they're called Company Intel Support Team. This is what they say. They take the smartest grunts, they put them in this section, and they become the intel section at the company level. Martinez is going to be part of that team. I'm like, wow, I'm an E7, and he still can't say I'm going to be the leader? What he doesn't tell me is bringing in another E7. So we go and do this 40-hour course. They teach us the different data banks. They teach us how to do networking. They teach us this system how you can basically create a tree to clearly define the network that's going on inside your AO. It was really interesting. I was grasping some of it, but I also started to say, well, this requires investigation. And I ended up graduating from the course, and we move on from Camp Atterbury to Afghanistan. Now it's 2010, and we are in Afghanistan. And we get assigned to RC East. And we're part of the Polish contingency that's down there running operations. We are a cavalry unit. It's Bravo troop. So it's basically made up of scouts. The strength level is different than an infantry level. So you'll have an infantry platoon that's about 30 plus. Cav is, at that point, we're only averaging 20. And we had to bring in an MP company. We had to bring in a maintenance section. And I was acting as the S2 at the company level. And we were put in charge of 5 districts, which is huge for a company. And right away, we are assigned to a base that's being manned and operated by the Kandek, the Afghan National Army, the ANA, but we're isolated from them. So we're a small base within a bigger base. And we have guards that separate the 2 bases, even though we're all within the same perimeter that's delineated by the HESCO barriers. On the other side of that, is a small city, multiple story structures, right turn, angled streets, pretty much like a typical North American kind of grid layout. And there's people running about their business. They have a market area and everything. So I'm running the intel section. I have a difficult relationship with the company commander. The other E7 that came in to help, I had a conversation, and he wasn't making the intel kind of decision that we needed and guidance. So in conversations, it was handed to me, and they put him somewhere else. And now I'm in charge of this 7-man group, and I got 2 actual 35 Foxes, which are intel analysts, and then there's 3 other guys, myself included, who are not intel, but we've been trained at this COIS level. We start doing it. But I decided I wanted to run it like a detective bureau, gathering information, sending our platoons to deny or confirm the information. And also I started internally going, hey, give me history on this location. And also I wanted to develop charts that tell me when they did certain types of attack. So the first product that they produced for me, it looks like a kaleidoscope, like an ink blot of different colors, and somebody's trying to do some kind of like fancy picture and say, there's a picture in there. I'm like, what is this? And so I realized, even though I had 35 Foxtrot guys, and they were very, very knowledgeable of their MOS, they still needed that kind of tactical sense. So I'm like, I want to see when we received small arms fire. I want to see when we received mortar fire. I want to see when we receive small arms, mortars, and heavy machine gun fire. I just want to see an idea. Then I want to collect that information, and I want to see if we can predict when we're going to get hit. That was one of the biggest things that we did. The next thing that we did was we started to go out to the different locations where our scouts were. They were in charge of police departments. They were next to a village. They were monitoring routes. And some of their missions weren't clear to me, but things were functioning. And then the captain, every day, he would bring in S2, the maintenance, the platoons, and the first sergeant's right next to him. And he's having these daily sync meetings. I've never seen this before, but it was a great way to stay cognizant of what happened during that 24 hours and the next 24 hours. So that's the environment I'm working in. Now, you don't get along with everyone. You just don't. And I wish I'd gotten along better with my captain, but we didn't understand each other. To this day, he's a colonel in the Pentagon. We've actually had a conversation once or twice, years later, about nothing about Afghanistan. But I got to give him his due respect. The man is an eloquent speaker. But he, I think, was still trying to develop his style of leadership. And if he didn't have that first sergeant, I think it would have gone south for him and what he wanted to accomplish. So they made a great team. There was like a yin and yang. I have to talk about what it's like to be a leader and be ignorant. So one day I'm walking with the first sergeant, and we had this one scout. And I'm still amazed how different the Army puts value in reconnaissance. Not to the level that the Marine Corps does. When you're in recon Marine, you're a tier level higher than conventional infantry. And that's well known. But it seems like the Army tries to equate the two, reconnaissance and conventional Marine. And I think they should try to mimic that model instead. They probably would get better results. So we have this scout, appears to be somewhat challenged in decision-making process, maturity, a lot of things. He just didn't project, didn't act, didn't do anything that resembled being a scout. So we used him for other things, and I don't think they put him out past the wire too often. But the one thing about this guy was he was always happy. He never said no. And he was just a good-natured guy, but there wasn't much after that. One day we're walking together, I'm with the first sergeant, I see that particular scout, I was like, what is with that guy? And the first sergeant stops me, grabs me by the shoulder and goes, hey, Harry, at least he's here. That was a paradigm shift for me as a leader. I never looked at it that way. At least he's here. And when you think about the numbers involved, how many actually go to combat? How many are actually in combat? How many people it takes to support combat operations? How many are actually in the military? If you walk around and you hear about the military, there are people who think that our armed forces are in the millions. We're actually about 1.2 million across the board. That's it. Very, very small, very tech savvy, and at least they're here. And so that kind of set the tone for me for the rest of my career. But getting back to the main point, so we're in Afghanistan, and we end up at that base in it's Ghazni with the Polish. Well, there's an incident at the main TOC, and I'm standing at the gate. And what happened was the Afghans looked at the Polish and thought they were Russians. They sounded like Russian, they looked Russian, they carried weapons like the Russians. And so that caused a lot of friction between them. And because of the culture and the perception, it kicks off an incident inside the TOC where one of the ANA pick up an AK and start shooting inside the TOC at the Polish. And we have American soldiers in there. Fortunately, nobody was killed. This guy dumps the weapon, runs out, and bolts over the wall, and we never see him again. I remember standing at the gate when it happened, because we actually had two things that came down, just like an American, HOA kind of blocking gate thing, and let me see your ID, cool, go through. And I'm like, I want to run towards there, and I'm about to go. And they call me back, and they're like, no, Martinez, don't go down there. Wait till we get a team together. By the time we got the team together to move towards the TOC to secure it, it was over. And the guy had bolted. And it was done. It was over. Another thing was that we started to receive injuries inside the company from operations, from incoming. Some guys were sent home, some guys got injured. The MP company made up of really good guys, really good, not just guys, we had females in the MP company going out on these patrols as well. They had the right mindset. I just don't think they were grasping the environment the way I perceived it, which was quite kinetic. When they first started to get ambushed, there was a lot of distance between the two elements, the enemy element and the friendly element. So through an historical review, I went to them and I said, hey, look, if you don't hit back hard against your enemy, which means if you're ambushed, turn into the ambush and get in the head that you have to kill them all. Start that battle drill 1 alpha, which is flank and maneuver. You have to do it. Because if you just turn and run to get out of the ambush kill and just keep on going, it's going to encourage them to get closer. And that's exactly what happened. They ended up taking one of the MRAPs. They lifted it up in the air. It dropped on its side. A bunch of them got wounded. Unfortunately, again, no one was killed. To the credit of the maintenance section, that vehicle was back in operations, I want to say within 48 hours. Amazing NCO leading that maintenance section. It was just turnaround. So we were a company behaving like a battalion. Again, I was pushing my section, hey, go out on these patrols if you want the respect of the grunts, even the scouts. I looked at my scouts like grunts because they were doing grunt jobs and they were also doing their job as scouts. Great unit. So, and they're led by certain leaders that were just truly leaders. They go out there, they're doing their jobs. I get invited, I go out, and we get into a fight. And it's a pretty intense fight. And we come back from the fight, everyone's okay, no one's hurt. We just made contact, they made contact with them. I'm not I wasn't aware that I was kind of being watched, because I was projecting this kind of, I've been there, done this before, I'm not surprised. And I actually picked that up from another book I read. If you don't want to be surprised by the enemy, you've got to immerse yourself in what they are doing. And you've got to get a well-rounded picture. To avoid that, oh my God, how did this happen? We come back and we get picked up to be moved from Ghazni, and we go to Gardez. And as we're in Gardez, several things happen where the command team is gone. They're on leave. And as they're on leave, a mission unfolds. 2 Americans, for whatever reason, are driving a civilian vehicle, and they are kidnapped by enemy forces, Taliban. And it's happening in the Logar Valley. So they want to block all routes leading out of the Logar Valley to recover, to rescue these 2 Americans. And we're working with the 173rd Airborne Brigade, and we're working with an SF unit. I never see these other guys, but we're all working in the same area trying to accomplish the same thing. It's miserable weather. It's hot during the day, it's freezing at night, and it's raining on us. We land inside the Logar Valley. It's like a bowl. We do an air assault in. We get on the road. We take some little bit of small arms fire. We turn the small arms fire, and we're just walking, and we're walking. And as we get into the Logar Valley, we decide that we're going to enter this village. And it's not like the villages like you imagine, like little hamlets here and there. They're little fortresses themselves. They'll contain up to 20 people inside, meaning they're all from the same family, but there's a husband and wife here, there's another husband and wife over there, then there's the older father and mother, and they've got their own little clan going. So we walk into one of these. They actually got parapets and high walls, and we get attacked. And it's on. And I think I said this earlier. I'm in this fight. At one point, I'm carrying 9 hand grenades. I'm faced off, and they're in an orchard, and they're firing from inside the orchard against us with heavy machine gun that we can't get up over the wall to return fire. So I'm like, hey man, take your hand grenades out, and we're gonna throw at least 5 to 6 hand grenades. So a bunch of guys get out, they get their hand grenades, and I do the countdown, we throw the hand grenades off, and there's a pause. Boom, and then we get up on the wall, and we were able to overcome their fire. And we're just lighting up that orchard. And suddenly they must have shifted, because then another corner of the structure starts receiving this incoming fire. And you could see the wall just being weakened. Like it's getting shorter, and the guys behind it are getting lower to avoid being shot. And that's when we send over Sauceda and Green into the corner, and that erupts into a big dust bowl. I thought they get killed, and they stand up and they return fire against the enemy. So the enemy again shifts one more time. I must have been facing south because it was the west wall. So the west wall is getting lit up. And I'm like, I need to get over there, but I want to stay here. But I don't think there's no leadership over there. So I want to make sure people are staying in their lanes, and we're fighting the 4 corners, so to speak, maintaining that 360. And it takes a lot of discipline to be in that kind of situation, because everybody wants to go help that side that's involved in the fight. You can't do that. But I'm seeing 2 E7s to my left. I'm seeing the command team behind me, kind of inside the dwelling on the radios. They're trying to call in support. And all of a sudden, as I start to move, this helicopter comes over, and it's getting banged up. You could see it taking incoming. You can see it's taking small arms fire and machine gun, and it's just shaking, and it's trying to do something. I wasn't understanding what it was doing. Like, that thing's going to come down, and then it limps away, and it crashes, makes a hard landing inside friendly forces base nearby. I think they called it Chakar. So that happens. Now we're low on water. There's 3 points of attacks on us. They're coming at us from 3 different sides. Guys are hungry, they're sunburned, they're tired, and this thing is not, it's not letting up. So they call in one more time, and they come in real fast and slow, and they drop the water, the ammo, the food, everything to sustain us. And the way I remember it, somebody has to go get it. And I remember one of the soldiers, Snider, he says, I'll lead a team, or I'll be part of a team that goes out there and gets it. And under all this melee, this fray that we're in, they run out there and they collect the speedball bags and they bring them in. I don't think people can appreciate what that means. Like, they could have died out there. They could have gotten caught in the machine gun fire. They could have been sniped. A lot of bad things could have happened. But because we needed it, these small core group of guys went and did it. Amazing display of selfless behavior. It's just amazing. So we end up fighting them. They finally realize they're not getting anywhere with us. We're not getting anywhere with them. And they leave. And at that point, the decision's made, hey, look, it turns out that the rescue effort is done. It's now become a recovery effort. They're looking for bodies. So our part is done, and we have to link up with Hilo extract, but it's a mile away, and we don't know where the enemy is. So everybody packs up their gear. They're low on water, low on ammo. They got these heavy paperweight weapons, and we start rucking, and we're going. And guys are switching rifles because people are at different stages of exhaustion. I don't know, it was mental or physical. I felt pretty good. I was winded a little bit. I didn't think too much of it, but I was expecting us to get picked up almost immediately as soon as we got to the LZ. It didn't happen. We ended up getting delayed. We were out there well into the night, almost past midnight, and we had gotten there in the afternoon. So when the night came in, the temperature dropped to freezing. And these soldiers, these American soldiers, were dropping, like literally passing out from hypothermia. Just boom. And then one NCO found some type of silo that contained grain. And we would drag these soldiers in there, dig a hole. You could see the steam rising out there, and we drop them into the hole. I remember in particular, I'm inside the silo. I've got this one guy in front of me. I'm wrapped around him like a blanket. He's unconscious. And then the heat kind of revived him, and his head's back against my shoulder, giving him words of comfort. Finally, aviation said, hey, we're going to fly to pick your guys out. Of the 37 of us that went into that fight, 17 went down. And the rest of us were walking. So these helos fly down. And we have, I would say, over 60 ANA with us. And they're separate. They're watching us. I don't know what they were thinking, but I'm sure it wasn't good. That's how I felt anyway. This can't be that impressive for them because they're fine. But are they cold? Yes, but they understand what they're dealing with. And the helo lands. I'm hearing all Americans from this particular platoon climb aboard. So I'm on the helo. I'm like, where's Mansour? They're like, he's out there. They're not letting any of the Afghans in. I'm like, we're gonna leave them out there? I'm like, yeah, they're gonna be on the next helo lift. I'm like, no. I had read a report that a lot of the killings that were happening between Afghan National Army soldiers and American soldiers was because they felt insulted. And a lot of it could have been avoided if we understood their culture better. I don't think there's fault on either side. It's just cultures were playing out, unfortunately, leading to fatal circumstances. That's my opinion, for what it's worth. So I said, no, I'm not doing that. And I remember stepping off, and I find Mansour. I'm like, Mansour, get on the helo. He's like, no, they said only American. I'm like, get on the freaking helo. So I actually pull him in, I sit him down, and you stay here. I get off, and 6 more soldiers walk off with me, and their soldiers still getting on the helo. And they're like, man, you got balls, man. Good luck to you. They're staying with me. I remember Sergeant First Class Mulcahy, Staff Sergeant Seymour, Staff Sergeant Merrill, myself. There was 2 more. I wish I could remember their names, but I can't. And there it is, the Afghans. They're laid out, not even in a defensive position. They're just covered up in a wool blanket, laying on the ground. And when you look up in the hills, you could see little lights like fireflies coming down the mountain. And I'm thinking to myself, what is that? At that point, the ANA commander walks up to me. We had a good relationship. He goes, you know what you're looking at? I go, not sure. He goes, that's the Taliban. They're coming. And the helos are flying off. And we're sitting there. I'm like, I need your guys up, and I need us to find a defensive position. You're not alone. There's 6 of us here. So we're good. With your guys, your leadership, and us fighting with you, we'll be good. We'll be fine. Honestly, it was all a lie. I didn't know. I'm just going to go what I know, and I'm also going to try to do my best, inspire. So they get up, they start moving their packs, they start getting ready in defensive positions. None of us on the American side, we're not even really talking to each other. Everybody's like already, I could see we were trying to get into our own lanes. Like, this is going to be my lane, this is going to be my lane, and we're looking at them and they're just getting lower as they're coming down the mountain. Fortunately, another kilo lift appeared, and it was enough to lift the rest of us out. It was just, again, selfless behavior. The ANA, I don't think they could appreciate what this small group of guys did. And I don't think we really didn't learn anything from them that we should have learned. Why were they dealing better? What was it? Their state of mind, their food? What was it? How can 17 of our mountain guys go down in cold weather and all these guys had no issue? And we'd already been there for over probably 5 or 6 months. Maybe I'm looking at it too critically, but at the same time, you have to wonder what happened. So we land, our uniforms from coming out of the Logar is tattered, stained in orange. We're hungry. We had to walk into this huge, like garage-like setting, peel off our uniforms, throw them into a heap, and they're handing us sweats. I ended up in this maroon top, maroon bottom, white socks, looking like I was ready to go watch TV in the living room. So maroon's not even my favorite color. But there we were, and we're eating. They had opened up the chow hall just for us, and we were eating these greasy, delicious hamburgers that would probably contribute to my poor health later on in life still. And that's how the operation ended. We got lifted out of the Logar, and we went back into, at that point, we went back to Gardez. We get back to Gardez, they had a market outside. Some of the guys would go and visit it. And I thought, that's a bad deal. I kind of brought it up to their attention, but at the same time, I'm just like, hey, it's just my idea. I really don't have anything to support the potential for a bad incident, but it could happen. After we leave, the next unit rips us out of there. Sure enough, they hit that market. And they hit it when, I think it was a suicide bomber, just walked in, detonated himself, and that market ran up right up to the Hesco walls on that American base. Again, it was on another base within a Kandak base. That was the trend that was going on. And I met a lot of good guys on that deployment. A lot of them would become police officers. A lot of them were police officers. Again, so I had that connection with them. I managed to win the respect of the unit because I was an outsider coming in to link up with another state. And it's, unfortunately, states are territorial. When I was with Pennsylvania, they had a term for guys coming in who were not from Pennsylvania. It was a kind of a little bit of the same mentality. You're from New Jersey, you're here in Vermont, we're Vermont boys. I'm like, all right, I get it. I don't care. Because when the fight's on, all that stuff goes out the window. So in 2010, December, I come back. It's just before Christmas. I remember being in my barracks. I got my headphones on, and I'm listening to Bruce Springsteen, one of his Christmas songs. And I'm not realizing, but I'm singing it. I was so happy to be back. I'm singing it. That morning we're having breakfast. Somebody goes, man, did you hear somebody singing some Christmas song? I'm like, yeah. He goes, it was awful. I was like, he goes, I just wanted to get up and punch that dude in the face. And I'm looking at, I look at this soldier. I'm like, bro, that was me. I was singing Santa Claus is coming to town. Bruce Springsteen's version. He goes, well, don't ever do that again. I was like, all right, man. But we get back, and it was a good deployment, and it was a bad deployment. Only in terms, again, this is my 4th time in 6 years I'm leaving my family, and relationships are not going well. At that point, I was still in denial that the war was affecting me. But I knew well enough that I just didn't even want to be home. I just wanted to be somewhere else, because the way the war was being fought in Afghanistan was not sitting well with me. Too many restrictions, too many guys getting killed and wounded, and it was, in my eyes, unnecessary. There were concerns that I could understand why people are like, is this a police involvement or is this a war? And if this is not a war and it's not a police involvement, what kind of conflict are we involved in? And so I left the United States again, and I went to Colombia. So to kind of put everything in context, in that 6-year period between 2004 and now it's 2010, and we're actually in 2011, but it's the first few months, I'd already been, by that time I was in 4 tours, and 3 of them were kinetic. The first one was Egypt, Israel, part of the MFO supporting Operation Enduring Freedom. The second one was Ramadi, which became a life changer. So in order to understand everything that went in, that happened over there, in that tour in Ramadi, it would change my mindset from a naive soldier. I don't even want to say naive. It hardened me. I was now battle hardened by my experiences in Ramadi. I was killing someone almost every week. Like sure, we had maybe, like in the beginning, I think there was only 2 months where things were quiet. I got my first few kills, it was quiet, and then a major incident would go on, and it did not stop. And that was between July to December 2005. And from December 2005 all the way to May, the killing did not stop. And that changed me. So now I come back, I do the school, and then for 22 months, and I go to Iraq again, and I'm assigned to a Special Forces unit. And initially, it was designed for the purpose of supporting their operations, doing internal security. As it so happened, I got selected to execute sniper missions with their snipers. And I was part of a team with the warrant officer. I come back from that, I go to Afghanistan. So there's 4 tours right there. So it's 2011, I'm in Colombia. I got it in my head because I read a book. A former football player from the NFL knew he had issues going on, but he decides he wants to play golf. That's his way of rehab, and it changes his life. I'm like, I think I'm gonna do that. I know I got PTSD, but I don't want to do it like everybody else is doing it. I'm in a different mode. So I decided to go down to Colombia. I left my family. I left my wife. I paid for the house. I made sure they had everything going in. And I also knew I was about to go through my second divorce. And I'm down there, I'm drinking, I'm partying like an animal. I'm doing all kinds of things, living a single man's life. I have my own apartment. I bought a brand new car. I even bought a house down there. And I had convinced myself that I was going to live the rest of my life out there. I was technically, now at that point, AWOL from the Guard. I get a call from my sons, and they're like, hey, Army National Guard's coming to the house knocking on the door. They want to know where you're at. I go, they know where I'm at. I don't care. But that phone call stayed in my head. One day, I decided I'm going to pick up furniture to set up outside my place because I wanted to have a certain look. And I'm painting and staining my furniture. It's made of wood. And just like that, I'm going home. I get on the plane and I leave. And during that year, between 2011 to 2015, I started to go back to Colombia, but to help the National Police, and it went into being in the Army, helping the Colombian Army train their snipers. I ended up going to Talamida, where 7th Group was. I had no interaction with them. I only worked with their Lanceros, which is like their version of Army Rangers. I went to the sniper school. I wrote up, and I want to say like 7-page report, how to reorganize, revamp their sniper schoolhouse and make it more effective for their Army in addition to their tier level units. I got paid for it. I came back from that. And by this time, both of my sons are Afghan vets. One of them decorated for valor. He's my second oldest. And he tells me, Dad, I want to go and be a combat photographer. I'm like, okay, let me introduce you to some guys that know how to do this. And it turns out he doesn't want to do that. He decides he wants to go and fight ISIS with Peshmerga forces assigned to these groups that are made up of what was later the term used for us, Westerners. So I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna stop you, man. I get it. That adventure that you've been born with, I don't know, we all have it. You wanna go fight? Good luck to you. But then my second son comes in. At some point he goes, well, if James is going, I'm going. Now I got both of my sons going, both veterans of Afghanistan, 2 tours each, but they only managed to make it to the E4 level. And I'm like, that's my entire bloodline. And if those 2 get killed, I'm gonna have to answer to their mothers, because each one has a different mom. And I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. So I say, hey, I'm gonna go with you guys. And it takes, from the day of that decision, it would take about, I think, 9 to 11 months before we actually execute and board a plane. And we left from Philadelphia, and we linked up with another American, this guy that I call Lucy. I have no respect for this individual. And that would develop while we were in there in country. At that time, Lucy did a lot of the vetting. He went through our own personal vetting, which was a series of interviews. I had him come to the house. We sat down. I liked what I heard. He had a Marine Corps experience in Iraq. I think he had done 1 or 2 tours over there. He was also in E4. But he had some capitalist ideas, which I was fine, not an issue there. And he had also made it known that I want to put teams of Americans into Iraq to fight ISIS, and I'll support them logistically and whatever other things they need here from Las Vegas. That's where he was from. So I'm like, okay, man, that's cool. That's your angle. I'm just trying to get my sons to live through this experience. I'm going to go with them. He also set us up to pose as humanitarians, because you couldn't go in there at the time and say, yeah, we're going to go over there and fight. So I told my boys, like, look, I don't want to bring us any attention. So we're going to dress up in suits. We're going to look like businessmen, and our bags are not going to reflect anything military. Well, Lucy shows up and he's like, hey man, I need you to take all these pills with you. I need you to take all these other medical things that they need over there. Well, my sons are like, they have their Coyote tan bags. They're like, we don't have room in that. And I was getting really annoyed. I'm like, all right. I had to pull out my military deployment bag, which is bigger and deeper, and it has that old style camouflage that looks like gravel. And I put all the stuff in there. And my sons look at me like, what's up, Dad? You told us we're not going to take anything that resembles military. And I never wanted to say anything to them because I was so mad. To this day, they still think that I just did it for whatever reason. And I'm sure they have their opinions on it. So there we are sitting in the airport. We're dressed like businessmen. We fly from there to Germany. We link up with Lucy. And from Lucy, we go to Jordan. And from Jordan, we land in Sulaymaniyah, Iraq. And we're staying in this 4-season hotel, beautiful, pulling out money. And the money, some of it was funded through donations, but the majority of the money was out of my own pocket and whatever my sons could bring at that time in their life, which wasn't much. And we're paying for the hotel. Lucy's staying with us. He introduces us to an Iraqi. This Iraqi is known as a fixer. He calls me uncle. He's not much of a fixer. He's more like awestruck, like, oh my God, there's a father and 2 sons out here. And he's trying to do his best, but it's not working out. We're there for a while. We're eating this great breakfast, and I'm seeing things that appear to me disorganized. And I feel like this guy, Lucy, is just holding on to our coattails, because what he does, and he explains to us is, I want to sell your story. I want to make a documentary on it. But we already had told him, look, we're already involved in a documentary using a well-known writer and a production company, and they're bringing in another guy. He goes, no, don't do that. I want to do it. And this becomes an issue. And I'm telling my boys, like, we shouldn't be involved in this at all. It's a distraction. So we're trying to figure out, where are we going to go and fight ISIS? And the first place we go to is Kirkuk. So at that point, we're in a hospital and we're looking for residence cards. I should have brought it. I have it. It looks like a pink card, your photos on it, Kurdish writing, and it requires an application as if you were applying for a passport. And it allows you to travel throughout the country unhindered. But if you don't have it, they can arrest you, or they can stop you from going any further. So Lucy says, okay, I found us a private bus. We're going to go in the bus, and we're going to go up to Kirkuk. What a disaster. While we're up there, we're watching ISIS, and I remember in one incident, you could see an up-armored Humvee. Doesn't look anything like we up-armored. And they're trying to cross the open ground to breach the defenses that the Kurds have put up. It never makes it. And then they start trading mortars back and forth. And at one point, they decide to bring us into a conference room. And in that conference room, we're all sitting around. And Lucy's over there. We got the fixer over here. It's Durban. It's me. I'm sitting in on the meeting. And the colonel, the Kurdish colonel, although he talks English, he's going back and forth between the 2 languages. And at the same time, we're answering back in English. And some things that we can't express or make clear, we use the interpreter. And he would speak, but he's sitting over there. So after things got done, I'm like, hey, look, Lucy, if you want to do this right, this is like what's called key leader engagement. And you want the interpreter right next to you so that he's focused on you. And so the interpretation's going on, he's still focused on you. Instead, you got the colonel looking across the room at one of his own people who's doing the interpretation. Then he has to look at you. Then he wanders back and looks at me like, what are you here for? Let's organize this a little bit more. And it'll be much more professional. We'll probably get more out of it. Lucy doesn't like it. He doesn't like being called out. And it involves we go behind a wall, and he's looking at me. He goes, what would happen if I punched you in the face? And I looked at him. I literally told him, I'll kill you. I literally will kill you, and I won't shoot you. I'm going to stab you to death. You're not going to knock me out. But you also have to remember this. On the other side of the wall are 2 of my sons. You better hope they get to you before I'm done with you, because I'm not going to fight you fair. I'm going to stab you to death. And I said, but if my sons do flip that switch, they'll probably do worse to you. So it's either or. What do you want to do? And he didn't say anything. He walked away. But what was happening is Lucy starts to decline, and he starts to decline in appearance. He was showing up in a suit, and suddenly he has his shirt off. He has a tank top. He has his pants rolled up. He's walking around in sandals. Looks like a total pig. He's not projecting a professional image. He's not projecting confidence. They actually ask us to leave. At one point, we get funneled into another room, and they tell us the Shia are here, Iraqi Shia. They hate Americans. So we're going to put you in this room. We're going to put you under guard. And there's a guy in there with AK-47 guarding like 10 of us. And I'm looking at Lucy, and I'm seething. I'm like, I can't believe I find myself with no exit except that door. And you can hear a lot of argument going on and loud voices going on outside. Well, they had told us to pick up all our gear, bring it inside, and hide any evidence that there's Americans here. Josh, in his haste, left his plate carrier out there. Sure enough, it has a big American flag on it. They're like, we know the Americans are here. And I looked to the guard, I go, what do they want with us? And he goes, well, they'll probably torture you, rape you, and then they'll sell you to ISIS. They won't kill you. But we're not going to let them do that. That's why I'm in here. If they come through that door, I've been ordered to shoot them. So I'm like, and I'm looking at Lucy like, are you done being stupid now? Turns out the Shia are moved away. They're told to leave. Everything settles back down. They call us up in the morning. They group us together. The colonel's sitting there and is like, basically, you got to leave. We don't want you here. But we're going to escort you back. You're not going on the public bus the way you came up here. That was stupid. That was utterly stupid. He tells it to us like that. And I look again, I'm just checking off the blocks. So when we get back from Kirkuk, I'm like, where's the fight? Where are these groups? When are we going to be involved in actual combat operations against ISIS? Well, it turns out that each of the groups, Westerners, they're linked to certain units. And they're their own people. They're not paid. Sometimes they get food, and they're only armed through their own efforts, meaning they're buying their own guns, they're buying their own equipment. And once in a while, the Iraqis or the Kurds would come in and go, you're going to go with them. And whatever team wants to go with them, they go and they get involved in the fight. And if they don't, they'll sit inside a house with high walls around them. In some cases, their passports were taken away. And there was a kind of hierarchy being established within the groups that was based on who's the biggest, who's the strongest. Might makes right. And I'm like, I don't want any part of that. And I don't want any part of Lucy. During this weeks, I find myself thinking, how am I going to get away, but still manage to get into the fight? And so we end up encountering two pair of brothers, Americans, former Army officers, both National Guard. And we form a group, and I start poaching from the different groups. And I put a 10-man team together. And we're at this hospital that Lucy had helped us obtain so we could stay there overnight, eat, and have a roof over our head. And I just put it out there. I'm like, hey, look, I'm putting a team together, 10 guys. I'm going to get you the residence cards because some of these guys have been waiting for months in this country on their own dime trying to get this resident card so they can even get to the front line. And then we find out through conversations that the fight is in this place called Sinjar. And Sinjar was a city that was devastated by ISIS and left undefended, and it caused a humanitarian crisis that the population ran to the top of Sinjar Mountain, and they had little encampments up there. And they're isolated, and they're almost completely encircled by ISIS, and they're fighting them off. That the humanitarian effort, the only way they can bring them food, water, some kind of roof, shelter, was through helo drops. I'm like, how do we get there? So they said, we're going to get smuggled in. But we try to go the right route. with their version of the FBI called Asayesh. We sit in the Marine Inn, we pose as humanitarians. They listen to us, they're very polite. They basically tell us no. So we set up another connection and we get smuggled into Sinjar. We pose as if we're supporting an ambulance crew, and that ambulance crew leads us through a checkpoint, says they're with us, and we go. And we have interpreters, and we have a 10-man crew. Lucy, by this time, has been fired. We have a German videographer, kind of journalist, who speaks German and English and has good relationships with the different factions that we're meeting. And we make our way to Sinjar. He wasn't on the first trip with us, this journalist. He would show up later when we would come back to the city of Dahuk. And we're there by ourselves. We make it to Sinjar. We meet up with Yazidi Peshmerga, which are part of the Kurdish military, but they're Yazidi. They're not Christian. They're not Muslim. They have their own faith. They're not Assyrians. They have their own faith and they have their own lifestyle. They even drink, and they only drink whiskey. And they've been in the fight ever since they lost the city of Sinjar. The female population of Sinjar has been enslaved. Any woman from the age of 6 to 60 is enslaved and sold right there in the schoolyards inside Sinjar city. And we find this clinic on the mountain, left abandoned, brand new equipment. We walk into a tent, has all these different medical bottles, from vitamin B12 to some really sophisticated medicine. Well, we open up a clinic and I use the SF template. I'm like, you're gonna do security, you're gonna do comms, you're gonna do overall grounds, you're gonna do the medicine part. And me and one of the brothers who was an officer, we called him Mother, I said, you're gonna act like the team captain, I'll act like the team sergeant. And that's how it's gonna work. We ended up treating over 700 people, from a dental issue to diagnosing someone with cancer, getting him medical treatment and flown out of that area. It was amazing. So while we're up there, we get approached by a Yazidi general. The Yazidi general says to us, are you guys military? Can you help us train? And we look at each other and there was like we're like, we'll get back to you. But there was a discussion like, should we tell them who we are? Because we're doing good. We're doing good stuff here. And I was glad for that. I was happy with that. But we're all warriors. So like, let's tell them who we are and we can help them with whatever they're trying to accomplish. Let's do it. And that enabled us to meet with this general. We meet his executive officer, which is all family. And we go down to their headquarters. We go down to their bases that are outlined in the area. We go up and check out the defenses, and we start training them in CQB. We start training them in patrol techniques. We start training them ambush techniques. I started to write up material to start up an NCO academy, because they took us to their headquarters and there was a schoolhouse that was left empty. So I'm like, why don't you guys start training NCOs? So based on my NCO training as an instructor and working at a regimental training institute, an RTI, it's a schoolhouse in short, I started putting that into the training aspect of it. And the whole purpose is they're going to take Sinjar, which, based on the information, is full of ISIS and slaves and collaborators. So we're walking up on the line, and during that time, we get mortared. In one incident, Josh, James, and I are up on the hill, and what followed up to get to that position are journalists. This guy goes, hey man, can we go up there? I'm like, yeah, you can go up there, but you have to understand, if you go up there, you could be killed or wounded, because they mortar that line. He goes, I don't care, let's go. He goes, I'm a British Royal Marine. big husky guy. I'm like, all right, man, let's go. So we go up. It's like a 40-minute walk, just going up a hill, and you're transversing it. We finally get to the top. We lay out, and you can see the Sinjar. Sinjar is only literally about 800 meters between the lines. That's it. You can see people moving around. And he goes, where's the population? I go, they're underground. They have tunnel networks. But it's like a trench line, and they just put culvert over the top, or they put dirt over the top. It's not like well entrenched like what you're seeing today in Gaza. It's nothing like that. But that's how they move around throughout the city. Inside the same city, they have a schoolyard, and buses will pull up, and buses will unload females, and that's where they're auctioned off. You can see all this. In addition to that, we were right up on the corner of Syria where you can see the oil. So if you look at it from our point, Sinjar is a strategic place. It's the last stop in Iraq before they move into Syria. So to the left, as you're looking in that direction, which is which you're in the southern position looking north, it's Talafar, Mosul, then Sinjar. No, Sinjar, Talafar. It's Mosul, Talafar, Sinjar, and the highway, I think it was 47. And I'm like, what's all this traffic? And they're like, they're taking the oil that doesn't belong to them. They're moving that oil and they're selling it again. And that's what's funding ISIS. I'm like, so if we kill those drivers or we start laying mortars on those roadways, it'll slow down that production. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, let's do it. So we sit down with the general and we're like, hey, look, why don't you do this? Let's disrupt their transportation effort. Let's disrupt their logistics lines. Let's start killing bus drivers. I'll snipe them, and that will have to make them think, is it worth doing a slavery auction right there in front of us? They liked the idea. The problem was that the general has to talk to the general staff from the Kurdish side of the house. And they're Arabs, so to speak. And so they're not getting along. And so it's denied. And at one point, we're like, okay, well, there's 2 little villages just before Sinjar. Who occupies them? They're like, that's the enemy. Well, how big of an enemy force is it? We don't know. I'm like, okay, so why don't we start pushing out patrols at night and deny and confirm who's in those freaking cities? They're small. We can take it. Mother actually does really good. He does a patrol. He comes back and he's like, I found them. It looks to be about a squad element in that little village. We can take it out. And their little headquarters element is inside this kind of cave thing. And in front of it, there's a machine gun position. So he pushes out this op order all by himself. And I remember coming back and I'm like, he did the op order? And like, yeah, he's already got the mission set and he already has a course of action. I'm like, that's not how it's done. And James and Josh are looking at me like, what do you mean? Like, you got to war game it first to develop you do a course of action development, then you do an analysis, and then through those 2 steps, you war game it to make sure that you're covering all contingencies. So I walk into this room and I'm like, hey, Mother, come here. And he's a really good guy, good heart. And he's like, what's up? And I'm like, you put this op order? He's like, yeah, I'm going to deliver it in about a couple hours. I'm like, who'd you war game it with? I go, you're supposed to war game that shit, at least with me, or some of the people who are going to be involved in it, so that we select the right course of action and we can determine most likely and most dangerous. He goes, I just did it all myself. I'm like, that's not, and the conversation erupts into a loud argument. Everybody moves away. So in the course of that, Mother decides at some point or another, he's going to request air assets for this patrol that he wants to, for this patrol with the purpose to, it escapes me, I can't believe it. Basically, they're going to take a patrol, they're going to move to this headquarters element, they're going to attack it, and he wants air assets to support the movement. He gets on the phone, and we're inside the general's dwelling, And he makes this phone call. And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? And basically, he's like, hi, my name is Mike. He's calling Erbil, the embassy. I want to get in touch with people who might be able to help me get some close air support or help me with air assets because we want to execute a patrol. And you hear him go, yeah, okay. And he goes, my name's Mike. Yeah. Hello? I look at Josh and James. James is like, Josh is looking like, did that really happen? And I'm looking at Josh to confirm, is this a dream? Mike looks at me with all seriousness and goes, yeah, they denied that. I go, no shit, dude. We're civilians. What are you doing? Oh my God, man. So this is Mike. Like I said, he's got a good heart. We still decide, hey, we're going to do this patrol. Like, all right. He delivers a great op order. He did. He did a really good job, to his credit. We're all standing around. I tell him, hey, this is the audience that you want. But I said, but if you really want to put confidence in the lower echelon, I said, bring them in, but make the rules clear. Nobody speaks during the op order. He's like, okay. Follows that. Everybody listens. They're on it. I go, okay, now we rehearse. So we start rehearsals. He kind of knows what he's doing. And in our immaturity, dealing with Mother, we kind of mock him a little bit. And that doesn't fly well with the rest of the Arabs or the rest of the group. It doesn't really fly well. So it was unprofessional on our part. And we get ready to go on this patrol. In his decisions, he decides he wants to bring donkeys to carry rockets because we're going up into the hills. It's a good idea. The problem is we've never worked with the donkeys. And I get into an argument again with him. I'm like, bro, what happens if the animal sounds off while we're trying to get into the ambush position? What happens if we make it to the ambush position and what are we going to do with the animals? How far away are we going to keep the animals? What part of our element is going to be with the animals if we separate the two? And how are we going to feed them and keep them quiet while we wait to kick off this assault? And then what happens afterwards? What happens if the animal dies and gets killed? It belongs to somebody. How are we going to pay that person to compensate them? I'm like, you can't do that. And he's not getting it. And so I think, and this is me drawing conclusions from what happened, I think they saw the bickering between me and Mother. And I think they're not agreeing on how to execute this mission. Long story short, denied, no mission. But Mother goes ahead and kicks off a patrol himself. And he brought back good intel. He went with a smaller unit and it was pretty good. I'll give credit to him. No contact other than they observed the enemy. And by that time, we've been there for months. And this journalist, he says, hey, look, man, not much is going on here. So why don't you let me do a little talking and maybe I can get you guys right on the line in the city of Sinjar that's being held off by Turkish Kurdish forces. I'm like, you can do that? He goes, yeah. I go, you allowed to do that? He goes, I don't see why not. I'm like, so I thought you're supposed to stay objective in this because, man, you guys are good to go. I want to see you guys do what you guys are good at. I can get you in there. I go, okay. And it turns out to be the biggest fight where I thought I lost my boys. He does his connections. He comes up with us. We are now in the city of Sinjar, and only on the street over is ISIS. And they have this no man's land between them. They're using like an urban terrain feature to separate the two forces. But they're literally right there across the street. I'm like, what's keeping them from attacking us? And he goes, there's mines out there. We don't know where they are, and they don't know where it is. So they don't want to send a force to attack us. So we stay in our own lane, so to speak. I'm like, okay. There's a female Turkish Kurdish unit embedded with these guys. And I'm meeting Europeans who are dressed like Turkish Kurdish, sitting at the table like their own soldiers. One of them, in fact, was a Spaniard. And so I sit down and I talk to him, like, what's going on here? He goes, hey, man, so this is the situation. And he goes, the best thing for you to do is stay quiet, and they'll come tell you when the fight's on, they'll come get you. But you're also going to share in the guard duty aspect of this occupying force in Old City Sinjar. I'm like, all right, we can do that. We'll play the game. And we're going out there and we're rotating on this one position. One night, Josh says, hey, Dad, I'm really sick. I'm going to lay down. I'm like, all right. And he's vomiting. Probably other stuff too, but all I saw was he was vomiting and he was sick because we're eating their food and we're drinking their water and we're using their same toilet that's probably there for 50 people, which is just a big hole in the ground that runs through it too because we're in a building. And we're in the hills of Sinjar looking down into Sinjar modern city. We're in old Sinjar. And you're running. You're never walking. And you're timing it with their snipers. Like their sniper, it's literally like, we're shot probably for them, but you're like, yeah, he's in that building. He takes shots over here trying to shoot. I'm like, just run. Just run, roll, don't zigzag, just run. He can't be that good. So we would run from one building and you hear, trying to hit us. So we're like, okay. At one point, they make their beliefs known to us, and they loved James. They just loved him. James was like, I don't know, he was conveying like this, I'm just a quiet killer. And James, back then, I hate to say it because it'll make his ego go big, but he looks like the actor who played Ragnar in Vikings. When you see him, I don't know. To me, that's what, every time I watch that, I can't even watch that show because all I see is James, like, freaking guy. Anyway, so James like, yeah, Dad, they love me. I'm like, yeah, they always love the Chai boy. It's like, no, Dad, they don't like you. You curse too much. You've been married too many times. They don't like you, but they're willing to keep you in the fight. But they love me. I'm like, all right, whatever, James. We actually ended up playing guitar, singing. I remember I sang Rod Stewart for them. They were like, they sang their songs for us. Really cool stuff. Loved their food. Never great food. Loved it. That night, Josh gets sick. And we had this former French Foreign Legion sniper with us. He's around my age, physically fit. And he goes out to take up his guard duty position. And we have, of the two brothers, we have this other brother, I'll call him Jacob. So Jacob is out there and they're pulling their duties and an attack begins and it's fierce. And you can see tracers going both ways. You can hear RPGs going off, smacking into the buildings. It's rattling the building. It almost looks like a lightning storm from the explosions and it would, like, you get flashes inside the little area that we had. And I remember putting on my gear. I'm like, Jacob and Pete are out there. I'm like, what? I gotta go make sure they're okay. Josh is kind of passed out. James is sitting on the floor. He's looking at me. He goes, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm gonna go out there. And I'm expecting James is gonna get up and follow me, but he doesn't. He's just sitting there. And I just thought, this isn't the moment. Again, it's the second time I've experienced it where you don't need to yell or scream. That individual needs to make a decision because he knows it could be his last decision and it's not my right to send him out there. So I put on my gear and at that moment, Josh rolls over and is like, what are you doing, Dad? I'm like, Pete and Jacob are out there. I'm gonna go get them, make sure they're okay. And we're gonna figure out what is this fight all about. And I walk away into the darkness and I'm moving through the streets trying to get to this position where I know that they're at. I get out there. And the way the buildings are made, you don't realize it, but you're moving up. So before you know it, what was below you and the slope of it, you're suddenly on the rooftop by just walking into a building. And right across the street is an ISIS guy, and he's lighting up that position where Pete is. And I get out on the rooftop, I crawl up to the wall, I kind of look over, and you kind of do, you don't put your head up. So this is the wall. Say this is the wall, like this, right? You don't put your head up. You kind of, you do this. Keep your head out, and you kind of lean close if you have to look down, but you don't do this. That's how you get your head chopped off. So I kind of do the old sniper thing, and I could see the flashes in the muzzle coming in from a window, literally like right across the distance from that street out in front of us. I'm like, hand me the RPG. I'm gonna kill this dude. And Pete's like, he won't give me the RPG. I'm like, I don't want to shoot with my rifle because I can't see him, but I do want to send a strong message. Give me the RPG. And that Turkish Kurdish guy goes, no, they don't know we're up here. I'm not handing you, he tells me in English, no, not giving you that because they'll know we're up here. And I get really annoyed. And at that same moment, Jacob walks in. I hear, Harry, come over here. So I walk over there in a crouch. Rounds are still zipping up the side of the building. You can see it, but they're missing us. And I'm like, bro, there's a nicest guy right there. There's a stairwell right there, unprotected. The only thing that's keeping them at bay is they think there's mines down there that you and I have never confirmed. So this is a very precarious situation. But I think I can kill. He goes, never mind that. They got enough people, they're gonna fill it in. We got the entire left side completely open with a road. So as I go through the hole in the side of this building, I look and there's someone standing there, and it's my son Josh. And remember, this is all black. The only flashes are from the fight that's erupting in front of us. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, I'm coming to help you, Dad. I could smell the vomit from him. I'm like, all right, man, let's go. And we follow Jacob, and he leads us out away from the buildings, and there's a road, and there's 2 fighting positions there with overhead cover and sandbags. And I'm like, all right, we'll take care. I go, Josh, James, you go there. Me and Jacob go there. Jacob goes, no, man, I got to do other things. It's you 3 holding this line. There is no one else coming. And there's this heavy machine gun that's up on this, like, what I would describe looks like a frame for communication purposes. The word escapes me, but they built a platform on it, and they put the Kurdish flag on it, painted, so highlighted, and it's got heavy machine gun, Tishka going off. It's just pounding the area in front of them, which is to my far left. So I'm like, that's it, that's all we got for support. So I'm like, all right, I'll take this position. James, Josh should go in there. And as soon as I get in, I look and I can see silhouettes coming up. I'm like, they told us there's nobody else. So I start engaging with my M4, and I've got an aim point on it, and I'm just engaging, and I'm seeing them drop. I don't know if they're dropping to stay out of cover, but I'm not seeing other people move. So I see other people moving forward, and I'm just dropping. And I can hear Josh and James getting into it too. And I'm looking to the right, and I can see, again, silhouettes just dropping in front of their fighting position. And all of a sudden, James and Josh's position explodes. And I can still see it clear as day. I'm thinking to myself, and I'm aiming at this guy. I'm like, I just lost my 2 sons. And I'm really focused on this guy, and I hit him. He drops. And I'm trying to find him so I can shoot him again, because I'm thinking, this is it for me too. I'm out here by myself. They're dead. There's nothing I can do about them right now. But I got to keep fighting, and I'm going to take out as many as I can. And I used to carry a knife. I remember sticking it into the sandbag, and it was like a dramatic move to inspire me not to abandon my position. Like, the phrase kept popping into my head, from here none shall pass. I read it in a book, and it stayed with me in that moment. And the knife going into the bag was just from, this is it. You anchor yourself. And then the fighting stopped. And I get out and I'm looking, I could see smoke coming out of that position. And I'm thinking, I'm gonna get blamed for this. And I gotta go over there and collect what's left of my boys. And I'm kind of moving slow. I could feel my feet dragging in the rock and the dirt. And I hear like movement going on inside. So I'm like, oh shit. One of them might be alive. And James comes out. And he's got this long blonde hair standing up on end. His face caked in black soot. Where he had clenched his eyes, you could see the white lines, like highlighting the expression. It looked like something out of a cartoon character. I'm looking at him as he's approaching me. He's walking slow. He's got his arms and his legs. I don't see any obvious signs of trauma. I bring him in closer. I grab him. He's talking to me. He's mumbling, and I'm touching him. I turn him around. He's obeying. I'm looking for exit wound. Nothing. But his hands, they're dirty, and you can see burnt marks on them and some cuts. And you can see some like abrasions to his face. And I go, what happened? I go, where's your brother? He goes, Dad, the weapon had exploded on me. I'm like, what do you mean? I go, all right, we'll talk about that later. And all of a sudden in that darkness, inside that hole, I hear Josh. He says, I just want someone to confirm for me I don't have a bolt carrier stuck like a dildo to my forehead. But he's not coming out. But I kind of laugh. I look at James, I think your brother's okay. He goes, Dad, let's just make sure he doesn't have that bolt carrier inside his forehead. I'm like, all right. And I'm like, Josh, can you come out? He's like, yeah, I'm coming out. He's 6 foot, big guy. He stands up. Like, there's no bolt carrier on your head. He's like, thank God. That would have looked weird. And I do the same thing, and they're fine. They're dazed, but they're fine. At that moment, Jacob shows up with another Kirsch guy and goes, hey, man, it's done. Great job. And I'm thinking to myself, where you been? But he was doing his own thing, I'm sure, because he's not one of those guys that shirk that kind of fight. I know that. I feel confident in that. We get back. I'm cleaning the boys up. I'm laying them down to rest. I stay up all night. I'm watching them. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, now what? When the sun came up, you heard this huge explosion, real close. But it was an RPG. And when I went out, geared up to go respond, because I thought, okay, they're going to do a daytime attack, finish up what they couldn't. Well, they had mortared the exact guard spot, which was nothing more than this concrete bunker they made on top of the rooftop, and they hit it with a direct hit. It was completely destroyed. And I'm like, is there anybody in there? Because that's our position. They're like, no, it was left unopened. It was left open all night. So they hit it. Well, Mother gets on the radio, and he's like, hey, man, you guys need to come back. And Jacob's like, no, we're staying here. And I told Jacob, like, you told us we're going to stay here until this is it, until either we die or we can gain some kind of positive position where it'll enable us to launch offensive operations. That's the purpose of defense. So this is it. There's a big argument. They're like, we're going back. The journalist that night, he wouldn't leave that position to go out there in that fight with us that he's supposed to be documenting. Doesn't leave. Somehow, he forgets his night equipment. I'm like, are you kidding me? But I've seen it before. Everything's a measured risk for them. So one more thing, one more nail in the coffin for me, what these guys are doing about the documentary. We go back, and one of the Americans that was with us was an emergency room doctor. That's what he claimed to be. He knew his medicine. He had a shaky story. He goes down sick. And it turns out he has diabetes and doesn't tell anybody. And what's his diet? Soda and Cheetos or some kind of potato chip. He ends up losing his eye because of the sickness. He almost died. And James stayed up with him all night, making sure he got his meds and his fluids to sustain him so we can get him to a main hospital. I think if James had not done that, that bastard would have been dead because it was stupid. That's why I have no respect for him. So we go back and Jacob says, hey, I got to go. I'm going back to the United States. It's like, all right, brother, see you later. And we go back to training. Well, there's another American that shows up there and he wants to train the Yazidi. And we've already established that. And a big argument breaks out again. And it gets into name calling. It's like, I said, why are you up here? You're running your deal down in Navia, on the Navia plains. And now you want to come up over here. You know that we're up here and you want to take over what we established? Like, come on. I said, I watched your other documentary and you're an idiot, bro. For a Georgetown graduate, you don't even know the culture yet. I won't even get into it. It's not even worth it. We get into a big argument. James is like, Dad, why do you argue with them? I'm like, because we work too hard to be here. And you know why? Nothing prevents me from arguing. So if Pussy wants to come up here and say something to me and come up here with his boys, bring it. Let's do it. That's what was going on down there. That kind of bickering. And though I was part of it, I was like, this is stupid. Not only am I fighting ISIS less than a half mile away from me, but I'm dealing with these idiots that want to come in and I'm fighting about who's going to train who. Like, this is not worth it to me anymore. Guy never shows up. Does a lot of saber rattling. I'm going to destroy you. I'll tell everybody who you are. You're nobody. Like, go ahead, man. Say what you want. You don't even know me. But if you want to know who I am, I'll give you my real name and you go look it up. And good luck with that. So nothing happens. And we continue to train and we go up and we go up to this house up on the hills again on the defensive area. And unbeknownst to us, they're taking James, Josh, myself, and Mother, and they're assigning us to units. And James and Josh were going to be acting commanders with the actual commander to advise and assist. And I was going to be a battalion commander to advise and assist. And Mother was also going to take another unit, and he was going to be an advisor and assist. So one night, I'm drinking with the XO, the Yazidi XO. Josh is drinking, and he's talking about the plan to take Sinjar. I'm like, cool, man. And I thought, well, this is a great opportunity to look at it. I go, do you have it all laid out? He goes, yeah. I'll pull out the map. I'll tell you exactly what we're doing. I'm like, all right. So he breaks it out, huge map, laid on the floor. We're there with our headlamps. We're looking at it. We're drinking their whiskey. And I'm like, brother, do you mind if you give me the actual plans and me and Mother look it over and maybe we can finesse it a bit? He's like, yeah, we don't have any problem with that. Next day he goes to the general. General signs off on it. I bring it to Mother. I'm like, we can make this plan better. Why don't you help me? And he agrees. Mother's got a good heart. I think I got a good heart. But when I'm in it, I'm in it. I don't believe in showing mercy to the enemy. And I know everybody has their theories on it, but unless I'm collecting intel, I'll let you live. If not, you're not going to shoot at me all day and then give up. I'm not buying that. And on top of it, it was ISIS. They weren't very nice people. So I was going to kill them. That was my intent. I'm going to kill them all. So we put this plan together. We showed them the lanes. We did a map terrain model. We used the maps. We told them how to do an RSOI. We told them what we needed at the RSOI. We told them what we needed to sustain the operation. We gave them a timeline. almost week by week. We felt that it would take about 30 days, given 6,000 man force, to take that city. And I'll be honest, I used the Fallujah template on it, but I modified it a bit and tweaked it so that we could take that city. And as the general's listening to me and Mother present the attack in this briefing, he's drinking his whiskey. And then he turns to his son, who he's using as interpreter, and goes, "Hey, how do I know where you guys are?" I'm like, "This is what we use the phase lines for, and this is what we use the terrain features. And as long as you stay in between these terrain features, these are your lanes." I go, "But you won't mistake my lane." And he says, "How's that?" I go, "Because everything behind me will be littered with bodies and everything will be on fire. That lane will just be nothing than a sear mark on a steak. Nothing is going to live." I go, "We're going to end when we get to the north side of the city and we're done. Then we'll reconsolidate and we'll link up with you." And he just walks away. And he comes back. Well, he's in there doing something, and I look at the son, who's the XO. I'm like, "Yasser, what's up?" He's like, "My dad really likes your plan. He's going to give you more M4s. He's going to bring you more ammo." And at this point, I'm thinking, I want a sniper weapon system and I want an AK, because apparently the ammo that we were using for the M4s was booby-trapped, quite possibly by American forces, if not the CIA. And the ammo was designed to damage the weapon. So they had all this 5.56, but I couldn't tell one from the other. And I didn't want the same thing to happen again. And as it happens, he comes back, he's holding a bottle of whiskey, like, "Here, take a shot." And goes, "Good plan." I'm like, all right, we take pictures, we do the whole shake hands. And in the midst of all this, I meet up with a gentleman, Dave Eubanks, from the Free Burma Rangers. And he's a former SF officer. And he comes in with his family. Amazing man. Amazing, amazing individual. Again, another selfless character in this world. And Dave is not playing by the American rules either, which is good. He actually gets these Yazidi people in a circle and he starts praying with them in a Christian manner. It's amazing. And they respect it. And it triggers something inside me, like, this is what we should have done. You want our help, you have to respect our culture the way we respect your culture. If we want to pray to our God, we'll pray to our God. Just the same way you can pray 5 times to your Allah. Just respect each other's culture. And here was a good example of mutual respect going on. So he's doing his thing, and they send me back out to the front, and I meet up with my counterpart. I know his name is, I want to call him Drew, Colonel Drew. And Colonel Drew's this heavy set, veteran of many battles. He's in his Kurdish garb, wearing his headdress, the way they wrap it around their head. And you could just see the way he walked with utmost confidence. Like, this was his guy. I saw it with my own eyes. We're under a mortar attack. Everybody's hunched down. I'm behind the wall trying to wait it out. And he comes marching up like, "Everybody stand up." Nobody's standing up. He's standing up. He has this huge crate with him over his shoulder, dumps it on the ground. It's a 60 tube. And he starts launching 60s from this tube, holding it by his hand. "Stand up, stand up." And I know he's saying that because I had an interpreter with me and he's translating. Like, I'm not standing up, bro. Those theatrics are good. If it works for him, great. I'm not looking to catch shrapnel unnecessarily. If we're in the assault, I'll stand up, but we're not. We're just here in the defense. But that's the kind of guy he was. Very aggressive, inspirational in his way, and his troops loved him. That night, I got word that if Dre was to slow his attack or stall in his attack when we take the city, that I was to take over. And I was like, well, what does that mean? What do you want me to do? Kill this guy? They didn't say anything. They didn't say anything. No, you're not. They didn't say that. They just looked at me. Make sure the attack moves forward. I'm like, all right. So the attack gets staged. American forces are bombing the hell out of Sinjar. And word starts coming up to us while we're up there on the line that we are to move off the mountain because executive orders come from the White House that any Americans as Western volunteers are not to be up there. And if they are up there, they're to be removed. Otherwise, American forces, meaning air support, will not support any operations. So Peshmerga shows up, and it's a commander, and he shows up in these Escalades, black Escalades, shiny, chrome, everything. They show up in a trail, they pull up in front of the house, and they're like, hey, come out here, because I've taken my 10-man team and we divided up in 2 teams of 5. So I got a team of 5. Mother has another team that's in another location that's facing off with a smaller village. And I'm going to be the lead element going into Sinjar with Colonel Drew. So Drew's up there with his staff. They come out. This commander, Kurdish commander, speaks English, walks up to me and says, are you in charge of the American contingency? I'm like, well, we're not all Americans. He goes, are you in charge? I'm like, yes, that would be me. He goes, okay. So we sit down, we start having a tea, and he basically tells me, you have to leave. You're leaving today. And I'm thinking, you're a Kurdish Peshmerga. This is Yazidi Peshmerga. So I'm like, no, that's not happening. He goes, what? I'm like, that's not happening. I don't fall under your jurisdiction. I answered to this general. And he told us that we are to remain here and I'm to work with Colonel Drew. So your conversation is not with me. So I'm gonna ask you, get off my mountain. And he stands up, he goes, no one has ever talked to me like that. No one. And I remember saying words to the effect, I'm American, but I don't represent the American government. I'm not a soldier. I used to be, but I'm not an American soldier. I'm acting in the capacity assigned to the Yazidi Peshmerga to lead Colonel Dre's forces against ISIS forces that are on the other side of this hill. That's what we're gonna do. If you don't like that, you take that up with the staff, not me. And at that point, we're standing up and he has moved down to the bottom of the step and he's looking up at us. And all Drew's staff is around me. And they start shouting in English because the conversation happened in English. And he's saying, they're saying, fuck you, Kurd, fuck you. I'm like, and one of the guys, his name is Noah, he's a Yazidi Peshmerga. I'm like, Noah, get him under control. I don't want that. Stop. Let's just be polite. There's no reason to get into that. So they just stand there trying to act menacing and they drive away. I'm like, hey, we got to call up Yasser and his father. So we call him up, we'll tell him what the situation. He goes, nope, you stay up there. I've already had this conversation. You'll be leading forces into Sinjar. I'm like, done. And less than 24 hours later, I get Dave Eubanks shows up. He's like, hey man, I just wanted to say goodbye. I'm like, why are you leaving? He goes, they told us we have to leave, otherwise we're hindering American support. So we have to leave, and I've agreed to it. But he goes, I think I screwed it up for you. I go, why? And he said, well, I told him I wanted to say goodbye to you guys. I told him I have friends up there on the mountain that are Americans and I want to say goodbye. They didn't know you were up here. They only found out because I let that out unintentionally. What was I going to do? I wasn't going to be mad. So I was like, don't worry about it, bro. Everything will work out. So we get together and we say a prayer. He's such a dynamic guy. He leads us in prayer. We close out the prayer and I'm on the side of the house. I go upstairs, there's a firefight going on and rounds are ripping across the sky over us. I'm sleeping on the rooftop with my son He's like, Dad, do you want to sleep out here? I go, well, we can go sleep downstairs and we'll wake up with rats on us. Or we sleep out here because the rats won't be bothered by the gunfire. Let's just go to sleep. And if we get hit, we'll be sleeping anyway. We probably won't see the morning if we get hit. We're fine. Like, all right. So we ended up having this real profound conversation on the rooftop under the stars. And we go to sleep. Next morning we wake up, we get another phone call. You have to leave. So we're like, okay. We pack up our stuff and we leave. It would be another 20 some days before they actually attacked Sinjar. On the eve of Sinjar, the assault into Sinjar, this journalist shows up with 2 vehicles that I was telling you about earlier. He's like, hey man, they can only take 2 of you guys to go in on the assault. But we had learned that any Americans caught before they do anything will be thrown into an Iraqi jail. And if you try to run into Syria, you'll be thrown into a Syrian jail. And you'll probably be there for 6 months. So what do you want to do? I wanted to go fight. I wanted to do the assault. I knew the plan. But I didn't want to take Josh with me because he'd already almost been killed once. And we got caught before we even made it to the lines because we were in the Hook, and it's a 2-hour drive to that front line. If we get stopped, they're going to put us in jail, and now we're going to rot for 6 months. And jail is jail. You're going to be battling in there with criminals who are probably going to try to harm you, rape you. You're probably going to fight for food. I'm like, it's not worth it to me. And I'm seeing all these military-age males around me. I'm like, this isn't worth it to me. So I turned them down. What had happened after we came back, after that incident, we had to come off the mountain, we're packing our stuff, they brought us into the room. They took pictures, they shook our hands, the general stood there with us, taking pictures. We're not really understanding what's going on, but it's confirmed for us, you're off. Nothing personal, just the way it needs to happen. And they bring in this convoy, a bunch of pickups, Helix, Toyotas. I'm sitting in the back of the Toyota, the gear's being pushed on top. The journalist is with us. He goes into the front seat. I'm in the middle. It's Joshua and another interpreter. And the teams are broken up between these vehicles. So James is in a vehicle in front of us. He has an interpreter, and he has a couple of the guys from our team. And there's some guys on the back with the gear. And as we're traveling from Sinjar to the Hook, I get a phone call, and it's James. I'm almost positive it's James. Basically, he tells, or Josh gets it. Anyway, I can't remember, but I'm being informed that the translator that's with James is listening to the conversation that's happening inside that vehicle, and they're not taking us to the Hook. And that the people that are escorting us are not Yasser and his father's soldiers. These are actual Kurdish Peshmerga Asayesh, which is their version of the FBI. And they're taking us to a safe house. And I'm like, what? So I started thinking, and I'm like, we're driving, and Josh goes, Dad, what do you want to do? I go, we're not going to a safe house. I don't trust them. And if they don't listen to us, Josh, you're going to kill the driver. The journalist, I'll call him Jerry. Jerry, it's like, stop it, Harry, don't do this. Like, shut up. You don't understand anything, considering everything you watch with work. This is a conversation that's happening in the vehicle as we're rolling down this single road going back to the Hook. And I quickly tell him basically, like, you don't understand violence. You don't understand anything. All you do, like everybody else in your field, is just watch. Well, watch what happens when you fuck with us. I'm like, you're gonna kill him. And so he's like, let me call Yasser. Something's not right. I'm like, yeah, no, something's not right. So I'm like, I'm making my own phone calls. I call up the United States. I have a contact, Special Forces, retired. And I give him the duress code that I set up before we even left the United States. I said, if you don't hear from me in 3 hours, here are the names of the entire team. I gave him the names. I tell them the direction we're traveling, what road we took, and we're supposed to be crossing for our final destination in the Hook. We're being escorted, unbeknownst to me until now, it's Asayesh. And they say they're taking us to a safe house, but that's not the agreement. So if you don't hear from me in 3 hours, you need to let the next level know. So he doesn't wait. He waits 60 minutes and he notifies his superiors from his former group in Colorado, and they notify Erbil. And so as that's happening, Josh's like, when do we do it? I go, well, what I've learned is the moment of confusion is always the point of transfer. So let's let them stop their vehicles. And if it looks like it's a house or something like that, then it's true. They're taking us to a safe house, but we're going to kill them anyway. We're going to dump their bodies. We're going to take the vehicles, continue on to the Hook, and then we're going to go straight to the airport. And we'll jump each separately on different flights to get back to the US. Before they know it, we'll be gone. They'll have to figure out the rest. That was the plan. A conversation erupts between Yasser, who knows English, speaks German as well because he lived in Germany, and the journalist, because he speaks English. He's a Berliner, but lives in the Philippines. So Jerry and Yasser are having this conversation. I should call him a Muppet. And I don't mean that in loving terms either. So this Muppet and Yasser are having a conversation. And he's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll let Harry know right away. And so Yasser gets on the phone. And he goes, no. He goes, you can talk to Harry, because he speaks English. So I get on, I'm like, Yasser, what's up? He goes, don't harm them. They are Asayesh. There's been a miscommunication. They've already been told to take you to the Hook. That is it. I go, they're taking us to the hotel. If they don't take us to the hotel, bad things are going to happen, Yasser. And now I will have control of the vehicles. And bad things are going to come your way. I guarantee it. I really didn't have a plan. I was just pulling a bluff. I know everything from warfare. If you can pull a roost on the enemy and make them think horrible things, sometimes they'll back down. So he goes, unnecessary. We don't need to have this conversation. You'll be in the Hook and you'll be dropped off at your hotel. It goes down that way. When we get there, the Quick Reaction Force, which is coming out of Erbil, is made up of Special Forces guys. And their liaison between the SFQRF and me, he's like, I want you to do this. I want you to take photographs of the streets. I want you to take photographs if there's an underground parking lot. I want you to take photographs of the alleyways. I want you to take photographs of the hotel. I want you to take photographs of across the street from the hotel. I want you to take photographs of the stairwell. Because if we're coming, we want to know as much information as we can. I'm like, okay, and I'm doing it. But I really don't want this to happen. And then another phone call comes in. He goes, we're ready to lift, come get you. We don't think you're in a safe place. It's not the same hotel that you thought, but we know the hotel. We have it on our satellite imagery. And I said, look, I really don't want you guys to do anything. I don't want this to go down. I said, but let me call back. I'll give you a call back because I got the rest of my team with me. So I go around to each of the rooms and I'm like, hey man, they got an American QRF made up of Special Forces come get us. They're gonna escort us back to American grounds inside their green zone. And from there, I'm not sure what's gonna happen. A lot of the guys, including Mother, he just shuts the door. He's like, I want no part of this. And all the other guys kind of follow suit. They weren't communicating, at least not that I'm aware of, but they're like, we don't want to do this. I'm like, okay, I'll respect that. I meet up with James. And James is with me in the room, and it's Josh. I've got them filming us, the documentary people. And the journalists are in there. And I get on the phone and I say, hey, look, man, I don't want you doing this. I think we have control. He goes, he goes, I want you to be decisive. I want you to tell me what you want because we're willing to do this. I go, I want you to stand down. Stand down. I need you to stand down. He goes, clear, crystal clear. We're good then. Hangs up the phone, done. Somehow Josh is sitting in the chair. He's like, Dad, I'm going to stay. I'm going to fight ISIS. And James like, I'm leaving, Dad. I'm going home. And I look at Josh and I look at James and like, fuck no. I'm like, Josh, you're coming home with me. This is over. We're done here. They got plenty of bodies they can throw into the fight. We're not going to get anything out of it. Everything that we thought it was, it's not. I'm done with this fight. We got American government already involved, military forces. If they need us, I'm still with the Army National Guard. We'll go. This is the only way I'm going to fight it ever again like this. But I'm not doing it like this. So you're coming home. Well, James says, Dad, if he wants to stay, let him stay. And I lost it. Like, fuck no, man. Fuck you. I got to answer to his mother, not you. You're coming home with me. And Josh goes, okay, Dad. And James like, okay, Dad. And James leaves. He leaves the day before, and we follow weeks later, and it's over. And the nightmare didn't end for us. Coming home, the transition was very, very difficult. And we each went into our dark corners. And I'm not going to talk about their experiences out of respect. I'll talk about mine. So we come back in December of 2015. I'm in a dark place. At the time, I didn't really know it. I was very angry. I was angry at my sons, and my sons were like, they were also angry with me. And I was alone. I didn't have a girlfriend. I had broken up with her. I was living in this big house, 5 bedrooms, by myself. Josh had moved out, was not living at the house, moved in with his girlfriend. And James is with his wife. He's with her. So we're all in our 3 different places. And it's not good. All the communication between us is always very angry. Don't want to talk about it. We don't want to do anything with it. And so I'm stuck in that corner. And I drank a lot. I used to binge drink. So I would binge drink once a week. And at the same time, I met my wife, who later became my wife. So I'm on my 3rd marriage. And that's also one of the consequences of being on this kind of life. It's not made for families. And it wasn't even made for mine. And I think we're a family full of warriors. So for me, I threw myself into physical fitness, but I would drink once a week. So everything that I worked for, I was just destroying in a single evening. It was stupid. And it went on that way for years. I remember at one point, I'm sitting in my living room and I've got my pistol on the coffee table and I'm spinning it. I don't know why. I wasn't intending to kill myself. At least I didn't. And to this day, I don't think so. And I'm just spinning it. But I did imagine putting that gun in my mouth. But I never picked it up in terms to do that. But I did imagine as I just spun it. And then part of me was saying, well, if it spins a certain way, I'll pick it up. But if it doesn't spin a certain way, then I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. And there was a distraction. And it's like I got caught doing something I'm not supposed to be doing. So I put the gun away. And that was the end of that. And So how do you recover? It's over. For me, it was like over. Also, I was now a master sergeant at the schoolhouse. I resumed my career with the Guard, and I was not in a good place. I was watching videos of the Colombians fighting FARC and stupid things that they were doing, or some good things they were doing. I just wanted to teach, and that was giving me a distraction, but I was drinking heavily. And I was with different women, and sometimes me and my sons would get together, and first it would start out all us having a good time, and it would erupt into a brawl. Like there was no lines of father and sons. It was just three guys at a table, and it would just erupt into a brawl. I think each of us had an idea going into this fight against ISIS. For me, the anger was coming from like, it was your idea, not from the boys, but from people outside. It was your idea. Like, no, it wasn't. I didn't even want to go, but I just could not let my sons go. They didn't have the operational experience that I had accumulated over time through professional education and experience, both in theater and out of theater. So I not only understood the theory of it, but I also executed that theory in real world. And you're going to tell me two E4s are going to run operations? And they may have to subjugate themselves to some bigger fool who thinks just because he's bigger and might makes right, he's in charge? No. And when we would recount events through our drinking, things weren't adding up. They had their perception, I had my perception. And it would make me angry if it contradicted mine. And it would literally erupt into a physical fight. I think, I want to talk about what I think about them, but for me it was, I was naive. I believed in trying to help a people that were fighting against an evil, but I couldn't get past the point that there was all these Kurds available to fight. And it was the Americans and the Westerners who were coming in, flying in, and putting their life on the line. And I was disgusted with the political line between the Peshmerga and the Kurdish. That, hey, you're Republican and I'm Democrat, which I'm not, but that's another conversation. But if you get shot, I'm not helping you because of our political affiliations. That's what's happening on the line at one point. I'm like, that's insane. The way the Kurdish Peshmerga would treat the Yazidi Peshmerga, in my eyes, they were like second-class citizens, if not some lower subhuman. That's my personal opinion. People would probably disagree, but I didn't like it. We're all trying to get the same fight. We're all trying to experience liberties. And not to try to sound corny or all-American and hear the drumbeat going, but I do believe in some of the ideals of our country. You know, God-given, unalienable rights, the pursuit of happiness. I get it. I think James wanted to be the leader of the group. It was his idea. And because of the culture doesn't allow young men, when you have an elderly with you, they respect the elderly. They expect him to be the voice. And when James realized he was not going to get that respect, he kind of started pushing himself out of that element and accept it begrudgingly. And I think that bothered him. I think it also bothered him that he started to realize, I'm married. I've already did 4 years in the Marine Corps. I've been decorated for valor. I've done all these things, but I'm neglecting my wife, and I need to work on that. I don't think I want to be like Dad. That's my opinion. It's never been confirmed, but I think that was on his mind. With Josh, I think Josh has never been in a world where it was totally on his own. And I think that goes a little bit for James as well. I kind of understood it, and I'm already accepting of I'm gonna die someday, back then a long ago. So every day that I get older, I'm grateful. I'm very grateful for that. But I don't think they've ever been in that situation. And I think that haunted them. And the only way they could make sense of the horrors that they saw over there, we would go and visit where the atrocities were committed. They would lift a blanket and it's just stacked with bodies in there, coming through the dirt. The dirt was still fresh because when they came back to reoccupy those areas, ISIS had left just holes. They didn't even cover them up. So it's a holes full of children, dismembered, pieces of scalps and skulls, pelvics, legs, arms, hair still attached to some of the skulls. They just buried it. They themselves buried it, and they took us to these sites. There was an incident where I would call them nationalists, Kurdish, Yazidi, Peshmerga. They decided to push forward before any of the offensive maneuvers began, and they found themselves encircled, and they got captured. Most of them were murdered, and a couple of them were crucified and then later set on fire in front of our lines. They've never seen this stuff before. And they had no venting. They didn't have their own peer group. It was just them. It was just us. And then they saw the internal fighting between the different groups. It was just a completely different environment. And it shattered our belief system. And maybe they won't say it, but it made them realize how naive they still were about world events, myself included. I'll never do that again. If America is saying we're not getting involved, and I'm still in the service and still can serve, I'll get involved. But until then, I'm not. That's how I feel. And I think that's how they feel. But they didn't know how to express all these things that were going on. And so they went the easiest route, which was drinking. And we all emerged from it. We all completed college. Josh is on his master's degree. James is on his master's degree. My BA. We're all much more intellectual, but coupled with that experience. And it took years to finally make peace with it all, from their Afghanistan, their childhood growing up with a guy like me, their wartime experiences, the loss of their friends. Josh witnessed some horrible things in Afghanistan. James witnessed some horrible things in Afghanistan. They told me about this. And so when you got nothing, and being Marines, when you got no one to fight, you fight each other. And we did. So you got this mixed soup, a stew of just ingredients thrown in it, and it just keeps boiling, and it's nowhere to go, and it's just us. And I think nobody wants to rock the boat right now, because we're all in our groove, so to speak. We've all branched out into different things. We've all grown from that experience to some degree or another. And I'm sure at different periods in their life, they've been in therapy. Like I do, I go see a therapist right now for a short time. In fact, but I'm learning actually more from James. Like James's level of education in that realm to understand what is going on with the mind, it's pretty impressive. And I had a really good conversation with him yesterday. He's like, Dad, you know what you're describing is trauma? And this is what happens with trauma when you're like this. And he gave the symptoms. And he goes, so what you need to do, and he goes, I'm just learning this, is that we're missing a step that's going to bring us full closure. But he's not describing just the experience when we were all fighting together. He's taking the whole thing in together. Is that the right way to express it? It's basically, it encompasses everything in
all
there.
Your experience.
All the experiences. Because
all three of you.
Right. I mean, I'm going to tell you, I like to think of myself as a professional soldier. I'm an ordinary guy, and I got involved in extraordinary things. And I'm grateful for that experience. And if I could do it all over again, I would. And I would try to even do it better. And if I could have killed more of them, I would. I'm not kidding you. I'm not saying that to brag or boast. I just know me. I just know that if that's my enemy, I'm going to destroy you. That word, it's the same thing as saying you're going to kill them. That's how I think. I don't feel ashamed of it. I don't feel bad about it. It's not what it was. Or it is what it is. It's just I wanted to be in that environment. Hey, if you're going to cook, if you're going to be a chef, you may cut yourself. You might even lose a finger if you do it wrong. But I bet you that won't stop you from cooking again because you've decided that's going to be your career. Well, mine's a little different. Mine is the world of infantry. It involves violence, and it's a scientific approach to it and has an art to it. And I would do it all over again. What made me want to be in that environment? Childhood dreams. I used to read so much because my mom and dad would isolate us from everybody else in the neighborhood so that we wouldn't get in trouble. So my mom used to make us go to the library, and we would have to every Saturday pick out 10 books, and we would have 1 week to read them. And so we would read, and I would read history. And in each of those histories, novels, some of them nonfiction, others fictional history, it was written like a journey involving an adventure. And I thought, I want to be like that. I want to do that. And so much so that when I turned 17, I was going into the Army. But I was already in my mind trying to prep for the next war, not knowing where it was coming from. And when it happened, as shocking as it was, as violent as it was, I was ready to do it again. And if I was 15 years younger, 10 years younger, with what I know now, I'd do it again. Even though I know there's byproducts to that type of decision, I'd do it again. And I'm not gonna paint this like it's a patriotic thing. I'm not. Me being an infantryman involved to perform in a world of chaos and bring my own violence to the table to control that chaos and master that chaos, that's my vocation, and I'm good with it. And I would do it all over again. I have no regrets. The only thing that bothers me, and I think it's normal, is all the people that lost their lives, all the guys that didn't come home, were truly wounded. That bothers me, that loss of life, and that I'm glad that I feel that pain. It makes me feel human. I can't speak for anybody else. I'm just talking about me, and that gets me through the day. I just appreciate the opportunity to tell these stories. Maybe people will learn something from it, maybe understand us a little better, or maybe it'll inspire some young kid in there, like say, maybe I don't want to do this, or maybe I will do this. I want to be that guy. And I mean that in a positive manner, not the negative connotation it carries, but you never know. There's a war looming on the horizon. It's coming. And it's not because of the events. It's because the United States has an armed force that goes to war. We've been doing it since 1945. So it's not a matter of if it will happen. It's coming. And we will meet the day.